Hi, it's Katrina. What if the greatest discoveries are also the most terrifying? We are diving into the forbidden archives, exploring things that are so strange and unsettling they probably should have been kept a secret. But of course, that's not what we do here. An Anunnaki god has been found preserved in a tomb buried 12,000 years ago. This discovery and the others I have in store for you today are full of intrigue and sometimes adventure, so subscribe and let's go! The Anunnaki buried for 12,000 years. In 2008, the Islamic Republic News Agency released photos of a mummy, but this was no ordinary mummy. This mummy could change history. Road workers stumbled upon a graveyard dating back to the Iron Age. The Cultural Heritage Department in Sanandaj excavated about 20 graves, pretty standard stuff, when they came across something so bizarre, it's hard to believe. The report is that they accidentally discovered a tomb, but this was no ordinary tomb. Inside was the perfectly preserved body of an Anunnaki king. The images and even video clips of the alleged Anunnaki are a little hard to find, but we did. The mummy looks like a man who is extremely well preserved. He looks human, though his skin, maybe because he's been dead for so long, is a blackish blue color. He was found wearing a silver crown adorned with jewelry and lying next to a jeweled box. He was found in the cemetery dating back to the 8th century BC, though some reports claim this body to be as much as 12,000 years old. But what happened next is a mystery. There is very little information about this discovery, which makes most researchers think that this discovery never happened at all. The whole thing is a hoax. Others believe it is finally the proof they have been waiting for, showing us where we come from. The secrets hidden in this ancient grave with this ancient mythical king will finally tell us who we are. The global powers are hiding it from us to conceal the truth. There are two very different theories about who the Anunnaki were to the ancient Mesopotamians. Some scholars think the Anunnaki were gods worshipped in ancient Sumer. The Anunnaki were the Sumerian pantheon of gods, like the Greek gods, and part of their mythology was that they descended from the heavens to live on Earth. The more sci-fi version is that they were alien invaders who traveled to Earth from the planet Nibiru. The truth might be somewhere in the middle. For the Sumerians, they revered the Anunnaki. They believed them to be heavenly beings who controlled the destiny of their civilization. Although it's unclear when the Anunnaki gods were first worshipped, it was most likely around 4,500 BC. The Sumerians believed that the gods gave them the knowledge to invent agriculture, science, and to expand their civilization. They thought the Anunnaki were descendants of a supreme being called An, who was so powerful he could control the fates of the other gods as well. But were these beings really from the stars? It was only recently that people started talking about planet Nibiru, calling the Anunnaki aliens, and supporting the idea that humans were genetically engineered by the Anunnaki to be their slaves to mine their gold. This mysterious discovery of the ancient king has brought up more questions than answers. Did this discovery actually happen? Was the body discovered in a tomb in Iraq the incorruptible corpse of one of these cosmic invaders? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Secret Nazi Witch Library, Part 1. I know that you know the Nazis were obsessed with power, but what if I told you they were obsessed with a different kind of power? Magical power. In 2016, the world was stunned by the discovery of a 13,000-strong collection of witchcraft, paganism, and black magic books, meticulously assembled by none other than Heinrich Himmler and his Nazi SS. Hidden in plain sight, these dark tomes represent a chilling chapter in history. This discovery caught the attention of the world. A library of esoteric knowledge of this scale is hard to imagine. It isn't something that turns up often, especially not hiding inside the National Library of a major European nation. Here's what the report said in 2016. The National Library in Prague had been used by Himmler to stockpile suspicious texts. Soldiers of Nazi Germany gathered every grimoire, spellbook, ritual text, invocation scroll, everything even remotely magical, and stashed it in Prague. Then it was forgotten. In the chaos that unfolded after World War II, everyone forgot the library was there. The dark scrolls and demonic lexicons were buried under thousands of other books in the library. The details surrounding Himmler's hunt for magical texts are well documented. In 1935, before the war even started, he established a special unit known as the H Sonderkommando. The H allegedly stood for Hex, which was the German word for witch. This special unit was part of the overarching plan the Nazis had to learn all they could about the occult. The Nazis were convinced that if they could only figure out the forgotten secrets of the ancients, they would have a better chance of winning the war. They wanted to find artifacts of power and learn the truth of human civilization. The Nazis were convinced that magic was the answer. The SS troops pillaged more than 260 libraries across Europe, accumulating a massive collection of books that was quickly dubbed the Witch Library. 6,000 out of the 13,000 total books were reportedly confiscated from the Norwegian Order of Freemasons in Oslo. Freemasons had been gathering their own collection of occult grimoires for years, so the Nazis happily helped themselves to it. Things haven't even started to get weird yet, so keep watching to learn about the dark depths of Nazi occultism. But now for a quick break because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Mary Rodman and Don Quixote for supporting this channel. Love you guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. This culture was older and more advanced than the Sumerians. After 5,000 years, archaeologists in Ukraine climbed into a cave and found some very strange artifacts, proof of forgotten ceremonies and rituals that have been lost to time. Researchers at the Borshivsky Local History Museum in Ukraine descended on Verteba Cave with chisels and brushes, ready to excavate. This cave is amazing because it's been home to human ancestors for the last 50,000 years. Its walls have been used as a giant art canvas for the same amount of time. People have hidden in the cave from violence, and they've lived in it as shelter from the elements. Now archaeologists have found what they believe to be shrines, shadowed places of worship where members of the enigmatic Trypillian culture gave praise to strange entities. Little is known about the Trypillian culture, also called the Cucuteni Trypillia culture, other than that they were highly developed Neolithic humans. They made their mark on the world starting 7,500 years ago, fading away a little more than 2,000 years later. They lived across Southeast Europe in Moldova, Ukraine, and Romania. Here are a few highlights of their civilization you don't want to miss. They invented the potter's wheel earlier than the Mesopotamians. They designed public baths before the Romans. They also built the largest settlements in Europe during the Stone Age. Their towns were big, maybe even bigger than the town you live in right now. When they really started to hit their stride, the Trypillian culture had megacities where up to 46,000 people lived. These were huge when compared to everywhere else in the ancient world. Some archaeologists believe this European culture was more advanced than any other on the planet. Their megacities may have been bigger than the cities of the Mesopotamians, who had supposedly been taught all they knew from the Anunnaki. Only if archaeological dating is correct, the Trypillian culture knew more than the Mesopotamians, and they knew it first. You can see by now why the Trypillian culture is such a big mystery. But things get even weirder. That might have to become my catchphrase if I say it any more often. The strangest aspect of the culture was that they periodically destroyed their own cities on purpose. Their cities weren't designed to live forever. They had an average lifespan of about 60 to 80 years. After a generation, the whole city was burned to the ground and reconstructed, either in a new place or on top of the scorched remains. It would be like if once a century someone burned down New York City, all the houses in it, and then everyone built the city back up from scratch. Scientists have never been able to figure out why the culture practiced such unnecessary destruction. At the megacity of Poduri in Romania, archaeologists identified 13 levels of construction on top of each other. The city was burned down and rebuilt 13 times, and not due to war or violence. They did it seemingly for fun. Let's get back to the Ukrainian cave. Like I already said, little is known about the culture itself. Nobody knows what they believed in, what their traditions were, or the names of their gods. But in this dark cave, archaeologists have found some hints. The Ukrainian team uncovered a collection of female figurines. The clay figurines were placed inside a large clay storage jar, with the jar tucked into a niche of a cave wall. The niche was so small that you could only fit your hand into it. The female figurines were protected by the severed tusks of a wild boar. Experts who know a thing or two about rituals are convinced this is evidence of a Trypillian ritual. It could have had something to do with agriculture or animal husbandry. The boar may have been their god. It's easy to guess, but scientists don't really know the answers. What are your thoughts? Amelia Earhart finally found. A mystery from the past 87 years may have just been solved. A group of explorers believe they have found the long-lost airplane of Amelia Earhart at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. This is huge news, gigantic news. People have been trying to figure out what happened to Amelia Earhart since she went missing in 1937. Tony Romeo, the CEO of Deep Sea Vision, called her America's favorite missing person. Tony is the man behind the discovery. He and his team used all the technology at their disposal to track her down. They haven't seen the plane itself, only a bright yellow smudge on a sonar that looks suspiciously like an airplane. To find Amelia, the team started by examining her flight path, her altitude, and flying conditions on the day that she disappeared. They looked at the 6 different radio calls Amelia had made during her flight. They put all these clues together and started scanning the ocean. Amelia Earhart was one of the greatest American heroes of the 20th century. Amelia was a fantastic pilot before she disappeared. She broke records everywhere she went. One of her greatest accomplishments was becoming the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean in 1932. In 1937, she embarked upon a journey most of us could only ever dream of. She was going to circumnavigate the world, but it didn't turn out the way Amelia had planned. During her flight from Papua New Guinea to Howland Island in the Central Pacific, she vanished along with Fred Noonan. Amelia Earhart, her navigator Fred Noonan, and the Lockheed Electra they were flying had been missing for almost 100 years. Throughout the past few decades, conspiracy theories have gone wild trying to find an explanation. One of the wildest theories you may have heard is that Amelia was eaten by crabs. Some people have suggested Amelia crashed on a deserted island, sustaining terrible injuries. The island was swarmed by coconut crabs who ate either Amelia alive or pillaged her remains and dragged her bones into the sea. Either way, what a terrible way for someone to go. Others think she may have been kidnapped by aliens, along with Fred Noonan. That would hopefully be less awful than becoming a feast for crustaceans. But some suspect she was captured by Japanese military forces and eliminated. Others think she faked her own disappearance to start a new life under a new identity. It's now looking like the worst-case scenario might be true. Amelia crashed into the ocean and died when she ran out of gas. The team with Deep Sea Vision spent 3 months combing the ocean floor using the most advanced submersible craft they could get their hands on. After much hard work, the craft captured the bright yellow fuzz of an airplane shape on its sonar. The fuzz is located more than 15,000 feet beneath the surface. That's deeper than anyone is going to dive. It might be too deep to ever recover. To put it in comparison, the wreckage of the Titanic is 12,500 feet deep. Tony Romeo said the airplane-shaped blob is similar in size and shape to the Lockheed Electra Amelia went down in. Tony even pointed out the vertical stabilizers at the back, which he claims you can see in the sonar image. But not everyone is convinced. Aviation expert Dorothy Cochrane said the mystery is not solved yet. Dorothy said Amelia's fate isn't and won't be confirmed until somebody identifies the object with 100% certainty, not just with assumptions and sonar images. The Secret Nazi Witch Library, Part 2. Getting back to the Nazis and the discovery of their witch library, just how demented was the Nazi leadership? It's believed that Heinrich Himmler was a follower of the witch cult hypothesis, which was dreamed up by Margaret Murray. The hypothesis states that the power of the ancient occult masters and early Christians would help the Nazis rule the world. The witch cult hypothesis also claims that during the Inquisition that spread across the globe, snuffing out the flame of heresy was a falsehood. The Inquisition was launched by the Catholic Church to repress one specific indigenous German pagan religion named Volkisch. The church also wanted to get rid of everyone who knew about the old ways, to banish magic and to prevent the so-called Aryan race from ever dominating the globe again. Researcher and author George Luck said the cult Himmler followed worshipped the forgotten horned god of the Celts and Greco-Romans named Faunus. It was a goat-like beast that may have partly been the inspiration behind the devil. Not all researchers feel the same way about Heinrich Himmler and the Nazis. There are a lot of experts who think all the stuff about mysticism and magic is bogus. Heather Green said most modern historians have debunked the theories of Nazi obsession with the supernatural. Heather said it's because of Indiana Jones and Dan Brown books that the Third Reich has become entrenched in rumors of witchcraft and occultism. But what about Nazi Week on the History Channel? Remember those days? It was always Hitler and the occult. Regardless of what you might believe, there is no denying that the Nazis looted cultural property across Europe. Take a look at this image. It shows an American soldier in 1945 standing amidst a mountain of ancient texts stolen by the Nazis. The picture was taken at Schloss Kirche Ellingen. It's real proof that the Nazis were gathering documents and manuscripts for themselves. There's no denying it. The motivation behind this quest for ancient texts is a little more difficult to prove. Some historians believe the Nazis were acquiring all of these writings not because they believed in them, but because the Nazis thought the books might be dangerous. They banned anything that questioned Nazi beliefs, including Jewish and Freemason texts. The books that were discovered in Prague are real. However, it's been impossible to confirm why the Nazis stockpiled them. The books were found by researchers tasked with figuring out where the roughly 13,000 volumes were taken from and creating a digital catalog for the public. If you want to see what kinds of esoteric books were stolen by the Nazis, be sure to check out the Books Discovered Once Again project. Is this really an alien artifact? Decades after it was found, scientists are still trying to understand the intricacies of an alien sphere. It's an object that defies explanation and logic at every turn, astounding the experts and freaking out everyone else. Maybe you can help me understand the mystery of the Betz sphere, discovered in 1974. We all want to know what it is and why it's on this planet. I'll tell you the story and you give me your opinions in the comments. Terry Matthew Betz was a medical student in 1974 when a fire ravaged the forest near his home in Jacksonville. When the fire was under control and Terry went to investigate the damage, he found a very unusual orb lying in the burned debris. It wasn't very big, the perfect sphere small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. On its surface was a triangle, but it had no other identifying marks. Terry took the orb home to his family, who said it seemed normal. The spherical piece of metal was obviously from a satellite or some piece of military equipment. There was nothing to stress out about. Then strange things started to happen, and suddenly there was something to stress about. The metallic sphere reportedly reacted to certain musical notes. The Betz family dog acted unusually around it. When they placed the sphere on the floor, it would move around on its own, as if it were being controlled remotely. The family thought it was strange enough that they contacted the Jacksonville Journal, who sent photographer Lou Egner to investigate. Sure enough, what the family said was true. The orb was moving around on its own. It also seemed to be emitting a really unusual sound from inside, like there was something in there scratching at the walls, or like it was a tiny music box. Then NASA got involved. NASA doesn't just get involved in random events. Then, so did the United States Navy. Someone high up in the food chain wanted to know what the sphere was. The story goes the Betz family sent the sphere to the Navy, who immediately recognized there was something odd going on. They tried to x-ray it, but their attempts failed. They couldn't even tell what the orb was made out of. They put the artifact through a gauntlet of tests. These tests revealed that the orb was incredibly powerful. It could withstand pressure up to 120,000 pounds per square inch. They also managed to analyze its composition after a while, and the orb was made of stainless steel. To be more specific, stainless steel alloy number 431. The specifics here are important because 431 is a machinable type of steel with added nickel for increased toughness. In other words, it's not something you typically find in nature. The alloy specifically improves corrosion resistance, making it an excellent metal for building deep-sea vessels or aircraft. Pretty spooky, right? The Betz sphere was made of a similar material to something you would want to make a spaceship out of. Then Dr. James Albert Harder from the University of California at Berkeley studied the orb and made some even bigger bombshell revelations. Dr. Harder claimed that inside the orb were two smaller orbs made from elements heavier than anything known to human scientists. The heaviest element ever produced in an atomic reactor has an atomic number of 105. The heaviest element that occurs naturally on this planet is uranium, with an atomic number of only 92. According to Dr. Harder, the material within the Betz sphere has an atomic number higher than 140. Dr. Harder suggested that if someone drilled into the sphere, it might detonate with the force of an atomic bomb. Nobody knows what happened to the orb or where it is today. In 2012, Skeptoid published a report claiming the Betz sphere was a ball from a check valve that likely just fell off a truck in Jacksonville. Don't forget to tell me your theories in the comments. Anti-gravity technology? Potential anti-gravity technology has been discovered in Russia. Researchers have found evidence of ancient megaliths 2 or 3 times larger than the biggest known megaliths in the world today. The scale of these blocks is unbelievable. Really unbelievable. You might even think I'm making it up. If you were to ask a mainstream scholar what the most impressive cut blocks on the planet are, they would most likely say the megalithic stones of Baalbek, and they would mostly be right. I've discussed Baalbek previously on the channel. Baalbek was a Phoenician temple dedicated to the god Baal in the City of the Sun, aka Heliopolis. Archaeologists think the city began as a Roman colony around 2,000 years ago. Others have suggested the stonework dates much further back in history, possibly 12,000 years. Only a few columns remain standing from the original temple. The heaviest of all the blocks in the area is 1,650 tons. It's 64 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 18 feet high. It's also considered the largest stone ever quarried. The megalithic stones identified in Russia have been estimated at 4,000 tons. That's more than twice as heavy as the biggest quarried stone ever found. I told you it was unbelievable, didn't I? The place in Russia is called Gornaya Shoria, tucked away in the Siberian mountains far from human civilization. It's a place where compasses supposedly malfunction. Those who have gone in search of the megaliths have claimed their instruments mysteriously pointed them away from the site, as if trying to protect it. Mainstream scientists are not convinced that Gornaya Shoria is legit. They think it's just a rock, but this is one fancy-looking rock. The blocks of stone here have incredibly flat surfaces, flat as pancakes. They have perfect right angles, sharp corners, and all the telltale signs of being molded by human tools. The first time Gornaya Shoria was even photographed was in 2013, thanks to explorer Georgy Sidorov, hardly more than a decade ago. With such little time to investigate, it's not surprising that archaeologists remain at a loss. They don't have a clue as to the origin, purpose, or construction methods of Gornaya Shoria. The 4,000-ton stones have been stacked up almost 120 feet high in some places. There are towers of stones. This masonry is so clearly ancient that to try and guess who made them is going to be almost impossible. Giants discovered in France. Apparently giants once dominated France. Men and women who stood twice as tall as modern humans lived thousands of years ago, and mainstream scientists do not like to talk about it. Most of the evidence has seemingly been destroyed. Nothing remains of the giant conspiracy. If conspiracy it is, except for a handful of newspaper clippings from around the globe. I've talked a lot about giants in North America and the various tales told by Native American groups. For example, the Siteka, who were red-haired giant cannibals. The northern Paiute claimed to have fought a war against the giants. The Paiute either destroyed them completely or drove them from the region of what is now Nevada. I've also talked a lot about the newspaper articles detailing giant corpses more than 8 feet tall being found in places like Kentucky, and of course at Lovelock Cave in Nevada, where the Siteka were supposedly killed. But I haven't talked much about French giants. In 1889, the London newspaper Pall Mall Gazette published an article that went down in history. They claimed that a peasant living in the small French village of Coutesson came across the remnants of a lost species. The peasant was digging a hole in his field when the ground gave way beneath his feet. He plummeted into a pit about 10 feet deep. It wasn't a sinkhole, but rather a subterranean chamber. It was basically a cave. its floor littered with partially petrified human bones. In an adjoining chamber were huge human bones that had been organized into some kind of cultic circle. It looked like the kind of place you would expect Satanists to summon the devil. The bones were so enormous that eyewitnesses guessed they must have belonged to people who stood at least 11 feet tall. It was such an amazing discovery that news of it spread across Europe. In France, everyone was talking about the human bones of amazingly large size. I'd say that's a pretty good description. A few months later, in 1890, the London Globe published another article saying that a different set of huge human bones were found at a prehistoric cemetery in Castelnau, which is in the south of France. Again, the bones belonged to someone who stood 11 feet tall. Again, the remains were found in a cave. Another discovery came in 1894. This time, a group of workers excavating a reservoir in Montpellier found human skulls that dwarfed their own skulls. They were the heads of giants and were supposedly sent off to the Paris Academy for inspection. Newspapers reported the discovery of giants more than 12 feet tall this time. Then the buzz died down and there's been radio silence ever since. Many believe that after the initial surge of giant discoveries, someone with a lot of power got rid of the evidence and suppressed new discoveries. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Opening the tomb of Cerberus. Scientists in Italy have just opened a huge sarcophagus from one of the most mysterious tombs ever. What they found shocked them. You might remember several months ago I told you about the discovery of the tomb of Cerberus in Naples. It was a very exciting find, with incredibly vivid images on its walls, painted pictures of the three-headed monster guardian of the underworld named Cerberus. Since it was discovered, archaeologists have been hard at work trying to learn all they can about the tomb, its contents, and who was buried inside of it. There were 2 sarcophagi in the tomb, each sealed for 2,000 years. Scientists first tried a non-invasive technique using a microcamera to investigate inside one of the sarcophagi. Now they've gone the invasive route. They've opened the stone lid to reveal a partially mummified body wrapped in a fabric burial shroud. Scientists are currently analyzing the body and the shroud to try and learn more. They've already found trace remnants of goosefoot and absinthe, which may have been used to preserve the body. They are trying to figure out what type of fabric the shroud was made of and are still awaiting DNA results for the deceased. The body was apparently found in excellent condition, though scientists haven't released any images yet. So I'll have to figure out what to show you here. The secrets of the tomb of Cerberus are still unraveling, and I'll be updating you each time something new is made public.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Where did the Knights Templar meet? The Knights Templar had one mission: to protect the Holy Land and the European pilgrims who wished to travel there. After the First Crusade in the year 1099, Christian armies captured the great city of Jerusalem from the Muslims, but the surrounding area was still controlled by Muslims, so European Christians struggled to get to Jerusalem because it was extremely dangerous. In the year 1118, the French knight Hugues de Payens created a small military order to help the pilgrims reach the Holy Land safely. This was the beginning of the Knights Templar, who would go on to become one of the richest and most feared military groups in human history. They were also one of the most secretive groups ever. The Crusaders built underground meeting places and secret fortresses all across Europe. One of them is underneath the city of Akko in Israel, an underground fort over 3 square miles. It's just one of many hidden gathering places built by the Templars during the 12th and 13th centuries. The subterranean fortress in Akko was probably used for about 200 years, up until the Ottoman rulers took over the city. They then built their own structures directly on top of the fortress, and it was only recently that archaeologists uncovered the forgotten Templar meeting place. Perhaps one of the most impressive places relating to the Templars was Colossae Castle. This was once a major Crusader stronghold in Cyprus. It actually served as the Grand Commandery for the Knights before they were all killed or exiled. You can see other structures built by the Knights Templar in many places in Europe, the Middle East, and Northern Africa, such as the Temple Church of London and the Templar Church of Veracruz in Spain. The list goes on and on. Ancient Jericho. Jericho is mostly well known because it's mentioned in the Bible, but it's so much more than just a biblical city. Jericho, located on the West Bank, was the very first city in history to have walls. Jericho is considered one of the earliest continuously inhabited settlements in the world, occupied for the past 11,000 years since 9000 BC. Archaeologists have discovered proof of hunters from the Mesolithic era, evidence of the hunters' descendants thousands of years later, and the earliest remains of stone walls. This was the very first human settlement that put up walls to protect itself from the outside world. At least it's the first one that we have proof of. This in itself makes Jericho one of the most mystical places in the world. At a time when many people were still nomads or living in caves, Jericho was a magical city with high walls, defensive towers, and about 3,000 or so people living inside. Jericho's dark secret is just how much blood has been spilled on its grounds over the past several thousand years. Jericho is mentioned in the Bible as the very first town attacked by the Israelites. It was completely destroyed, then abandoned until around the 9th century BC. There was more fighting and more bloodshed, and the entire city was eventually moved about 1 mile to the south, then occupied by the Romans. In the days of the Crusaders, Jericho was moved once more a mile east of its original site from the Old Testament, and there, the city still stands. Paititi, the lost city of the Inca. The city of Cusco is at the heart of the ancient Inca civilization. It's from Cusco that tourists began their pilgrimages to places like Machu Picchu, and where they descend to the South American jungle. For the last few hundred years, explorers have been coming to Cusco in search of a mysterious lost city in a land of sultry heat and exotic jungle. This place is supposedly hiding somewhere deep in the fantastic world of the Peruvian Amazon, and it's called the Lost City of Paititi. Discovering the lost city would be incredible for one main reason. It would show that the Inca lived deep in the jungle, something nobody really believed until recently. It wasn't until 1979 that explorers Nicole and Herbert Cartagena discovered the settlement of Mameria, providing the very first proof that the Inca lived in the Amazon, not only up in the Andes Mountains. How do we even know there's a lost Inca city in the jungle? The issue is, we don't. Not really. In the year 1600, Spanish missionary Andrés López wrote to the Vatican that there was a lost city in the Amazon which contained a massive quantity of gold, and it was called Paititi. It was supposedly a mythical place, completely unlike all the other Inca cities high up in the mountains. Even though explorers have searched for it year after year, it still remains undiscovered. Ancient Bagan. Ancient Bagan is the closest you can get to visiting Shangri-La here on Earth. It's one of the greatest archaeological wonders in the world, located in a place not too many people have been to. It's in Southeast Asia in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. Bagan is hardly as popular as Angkor Wat in Cambodia, but it is even more mystical. Bagan was once the capital city of the powerful Pagan kingdom and the very first Burmese empire. It remained the capital from between the year 1044 until 1297. And now the place is nothing but a massive ruin. There are over 2,500 Buddhist monasteries, temples, and stupas left over from when the city had been one of the greatest places in all of Asia. And yet that's only a quarter of how many monuments there were at the height of the kingdom. In the 13th century, there were over 10,000 of these monuments dotting the landscape, making Bagan look like Shangri-La shining in the sunlight. To give you an idea of just how huge the archaeological site is these days, most tourists have to view it from a hot air balloon. The whole zone covers roughly 8 miles by 5 miles. Like much of the world in the 13th century, Bagan fell prey to the Mongol Empire. Invasion by the Mongols decimated the Pagan kingdom, and political upheaval lasted all the way into the 16th century. It's shout-out time! Big thank you to Juan Dominguez and Erica Russell for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Mysterious barbarian lands. From between the years 43 and 410, all the lands north of Hadrian's Wall were considered the lands of the barbarians. For the Romans, this was a dark and secretive place filled with death, magic, and terror. They just couldn't conquer the people who lived in what is now northern Britain and Scotland. The Romans tried to take over Scotland 3 times, and each time was a failure. But they did actually stretch their territory a little beyond Hadrian's Wall, as far north as Moray Firth. The Roman fleet also sailed around Scotland to try and take them by sea, but nothing ever worked. Scotland remained one of the only places in Europe not conquered by the Romans. To this day, scholars don't know why. Were the warriors too fierce for the Romans to fight? Was the landscape too rough and strange? Or maybe it was just too expensive? Whatever the reason, Scotland remained forever the northern frontier, a land that could not be beaten even by the mighty Roman Empire. Southern Egypt. The lands of southern Egypt are not only steeped in mystery, but they hold many secrets that we may never uncover. Way farther up the Nile, far from the pyramids and closer to its source, there is a desert land that holds some of Egypt's greatest monuments. Take Karnak, for example, the largest temple complex in all of Egypt. It's so big that you could put 10 ordinary cathedrals inside of it and still have room. It's home to the impossible Temple of Amun-Ra, huge columns covered in hieroglyphics, and a history of over 30 pharaohs. Karnak was built, destroyed, rebuilt, burned down, and rebuilt again over a period of about 1,500 years. And immediately across from Karnak, down an avenue which was once lined for miles with Sphinx statues on either side, you arrive at Luxor Temple, another place of great mystery. Luxor Temple was built in the ancient capital of Thebes in the 13th century BC and has been in almost continuous use as a place of worship ever since. It's been used so long as a place of worship, one of its biggest secrets is that Muslims tried to repurpose it and turn it into a mosque during medieval times. The structure has changed so much over the years under debris and rubble that the front door of the mosque is now located halfway up a wall. Islamic frescoes can be seen covering some portions of ancient Egyptian carvings. And if you go back even further, there are faded paintings from the early Christian era painted over the hieroglyphics. The Galdrabok of Iceland. The Galdrabok is an ancient book of magic from Iceland. It's actually one of the most important documents from Iceland's medieval era and gives a glimpse into a faraway land where occult practices were the norm. When the Galdrabok was written, Iceland was going through a reformation, and at the time, the entire nation was caught up in magical traditions. According to Stephen Flowers, who translated the book to English in 1989, there are a lot of really important details inside the manuscript. He says it's the only archaic book that goes into specifics about Germanic gods, magical practices, and cosmology and astrology. Iceland was wildly different from the rest of Europe, probably because they were on an island. As Christianity spread and everyone started being ruled by the Catholic Church, they were able to maintain their traditions for much longer. They were proud of their Nordic roots and were significantly more difficult to manage than the rest of Europe. Plus, they lived in a land supposedly populated by fairies and other creatures, where volcanoes frequently went off and filled the sky with fire. The Galdrabok goes into detail about intentional spells, magically motivated spells, protective formulas, spells for bringing good fortune, and aggressive forms of magic that could hurt people, and everything else you could think of. The Duk-Duk. The Duk-Duk is a secret society from a faraway land. They are a subset of people from the traditional culture of the Tolai in the area of New Britain. They live on the largest island in the Bismarck archipelago off the coast of the island of New Guinea. Just like the ancient Icelandic people, the Duk-Duk live in a world of magic. Their magic is quite a bit different. Only men can be part of the Duk-Duk society, which is very respectable and secretive to the rest of the Tolai. They work with spirits, perform ritual dances, and cannot be looked upon by women or children. They can really only look at each other, and the men of the tribes can watch their performances. They typically wear masks to invoke either the male spirit or the female spirit, along with huge capes of bushy leaves. The rituals were so secret and their festivals so closely guarded that up until recently, supposedly strangers were only allowed to watch if they agreed to be killed after. And the Duk-Duk only appear on the full moon. For centuries, they were considered to be the wielders of justice. They were involved in all tribal matters and were the ones who would often execute people. They would carry out punishments while dressed in their traditional masks and capes, burning people's houses down, and sometimes even massacring them. Now, in the 21st century, the Duk-Duk of New Guinea have all but faded away. They still do the dances, but mostly as a tourist attraction and to keep at least some of their traditions alive. Fairies in Ireland. Outside the major cities and large towns, Ireland is still a land of folklore and mysticism. In fact, there are still 5 ancient places in Ireland where you can supposedly spot fairies or pixies moving from one realm to another. In Irish lore, the fairies were also known as little people who lived in the forest underground or in a parallel world. Fairies rarely allow themselves to be seen by regular people, but often cause mischief. Your luck and health could be directly affected by fairies, so you didn't want to make them angry. Of course, local myths are not quite as prevalent in society as they used to be, but Irish folklore is still a big part of the culture. Take Greenan of Alliek, for example, a preserved ring fort or a fairy fort in Donegal. There were once about 60,000 such ring forts, but very few remain now, and even less remain still standing. This one dates back to at least 2,000 years ago. It was used by the O'Neill clan from between the 5th and 12th centuries, and is now known as a hotspot for supernatural occurrences. People still come to this ancient fort to commune with the fairies. Secret society in Pompeii. Just shy of 2,000 years ago, Pompeii must have been a truly strange and mysterious place to behold. After Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79, and Pompeii was covered in ash, it would have been a no-go zone for centuries. People would have been scared to get near Pompeii, as it would have been a dead place, with the humans who once lived there transformed into statues, as if they'd gotten into a staring contest with Medusa. But before Pompeii became the most haunted place in Europe, it was a totally normal city. Scientists even recently discovered the lodge of a secret society. The secret society was a group of engineering specialists called agrimensors. They used extremely sophisticated measuring tools as part of their craft, a secret which was well guarded and made them wildly important. They held meetings in a structure named the House of Orion. According to researchers with the Great Pompeii Project, an initiative to restore the ancient city, they found images of the society's special tools on the floor, specifically a tool called a groma, which was originally developed in Egypt and then used by Greek and Roman surveyors. These agrimensors most likely operated out of the House of Orion, kind of like a primitive version of the Freemasons. They held sacred their measuring principles and safeguarded the knowledge of the builders going back millennia. They quite literally had the power to make or break a city. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite mysterious land from ancient history? Let us all know in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!